Hello, I'm Grady Hutcherson, proudly serving as the president of the Wyoming Education Association. Prior to this role, I taught in Torrington in Goshen County School District number 1 for 24 years. And the majority of those years, I taught second grade. I also had the wonderful opportunity and taught migrant school during the summers for 15 years. I would like to take a moment, certainly before I begin, and thank Colby and Nicholas for reaching out to me and asking me to provide a best practice training for all of you for related to collaborating and really ensuring that education employees' voices are involved in the decision-making process when it comes to education policy. I also want to thank all of you for the work that you do day in and day out. I also want to acknowledge and know that many of you have a lot of experience in this area. So I am not wanting to inadvertently step on anyone's toes, but I just want to share some insight and best practices so that ultimately all of us continue to collaborate and work together. When I was preparing for this presentation, I really just stopped to think about the important work that the partnership has been doing over the years. And please know that I'm greatly appreciative of all of the work that the Wyoming School University Partnership does. But I really went back to the vision and focused on this aspect of continuous and collaborative engagement, because ultimately that's what it takes if we want all of our students to be successful and to be impacting education policy so that it is reflective of the needs of our students, as well as our public school districts, and certainly education employees. Before I continue, I just have to chuckle a little bit because I always think about like holiday get-togethers and meals, and everybody is always warning me, don't talk about politics or religion at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner. And I certainly understand that, but I want to tell you the Wyoming Education Association is obviously very involved in politics, and the reason why we are involved in politics is because, as you all know, every decision that is made that impacts education employees and students is a decision that is made by elected officials, and everything is political when it comes to public education. I want to take a moment just to clarify. I'm not going to go deeply into this, but many of you also know that elections obviously are also very closely related to the work that is done with politics. However, it's the Wyoming Education Association Political Action Committee for Education, which is a separate entity that works with elections and nominations of candidates. So that's entirely separate, does not include any dues dollars from WEA, and that is a separate branch of important work that we do. Today for the training, I really am just focused on that aspect of politics and our continued collaboration so that, as I said, we have a positive impact on decisions that are being made. And when I think about those decisions, in my mind, I really have split it out into items that can be done at the district and local level, as well as at the state level. And I am not going to go into detail during this presentation about the national level, but WA certainly is also involved with advocating for students and education employees at the national level as well. So when I stop and think about the district and local aspect, I know many of you as superintendents already are doing many of these things, and I applaud and congratulate you for doing so. I also encourage you to think about other opportunities. We know the political rhetoric right now is probably at its most extreme that it's ever been before. There are times when voices that are being heard are very loud voices, and they may not reflect all of the voices and opinions around an issue. So we certainly need to think about engaging district employees in all of the process. And I say employees because obviously there are classroom teachers, but we also need to remember, and you all know without me having to tell you, that we also have all of our education support professionals who truly run the schools, and the schools wouldn't be able to operate without all of those employees. So their voice is also critical when we are collaborating and working together to make the best possible decisions. There's a little bit of overlap with the district and local as well as the state, because keep in mind that our elected officials are still representing you all at the local level and what's happening in your districts. But we all know that the most important place to start is really developing relationships and building those, so that when there is a discussion or a topic, we have that relationship, we understand one another and can have conversations that are needed. Those strong relationships ultimately benefit the process. And from my perspective, I would encourage you to think about inviting your state legislators to the district to see what's happening, to take classroom visits and school visits so that they get a really accurate picture. I'm regularly amazed at how many folks think they know everything about education just because they were a student at once or at one point. But if we can provide opportunities, and it could even include school board members being in classrooms and being in schools, having conversations with the education employees to really help them understand what's happening, as well as to lift up and celebrate the amazing work that the education employees are doing day in and day out. But also, I regularly find myself amazed by our students and seeing how truly amazing and wonderful they are. When I was in Goshen, I was very grateful and appreciative because the district superintendent had regular monthly meetings with the association leaders, and was able to hear from those employees in order to be able to know what issues were bubbling up and how to address those. We also had a policy committee. I know many of you do. I just want to encourage you to think about your policy committees and how those are structured, and whether or not they include the voices of education employees from classrooms through all the job categories. If you're discussing changes to a policy related to busing, for example, it would certainly make sense to have our bus drivers at that policy committee meeting, because they know better than any of us, because they're doing that job day in and day out, and their voice needs to be part of the process. Again, I think it's worth mentioning that just because of how divisive some of the topics have become lately, as I mentioned, we hear from folks, usually the situation is that are unhappy or don't agree. But I think it's also important for us to remember the voices of community members and family members who do support what is currently happening, and their voices need to be represented as well. During your school board meetings, I know it's common practice to have public forum, and I certainly encourage you to utilize that process. But again, to think about ways that it can be balanced so that you're hearing not just from opponents to something, but also supporters. And again, realizing the value and importance of the people who are doing the work every day, and including the voices of our education employees during those school board meetings. My history in Goshen also will share with you one of my favorite parts of the school board meeting was when they had an agenda item and they would celebrate the success, because we know our public schools are continuing to do a phenomenal job. And we really should think about ways to lift those up. I know I try not to do too much with social media, but I do know that many of your districts are also really in the process of lifting up and celebrating the amazing work and success that's happening via social media. Next, we'll move to, if I can get my mouse to cooperate, next we'll move to thinking about some best practices at the state level. And again, my intention is not to inadvertently step on any of your toes. I know many of you are very involved and have a great deal of experience yourselves. But I think it's worth noting and thinking about at the state level. Obviously, we have the general session, but it's important to realize that there's work going on throughout the entire year. So during the general session, of course, there's opportunities to attend the standing committee meetings to provide testimony and to share. And it's been interesting over time, and of course, it's dependent upon the topic, I would say. But if we can include the voice of education employees to help guide the legislators' decision making when it comes to policy, I think that's critical. I continue to believe that unfortunately the current system often leaves their voices out, which is unfortunate, because as we all know, they're the ones doing the work and they are the ones who are impacted by those decisions that are being made. I also know that there are times, depending on the topic, it makes perfect sense for superintendents and business managers to be thinking about how they can testify and provide information to legislators. And that's important. When I think back, now I'm going on nearly 30 years in the profession with being involved in education decision-making processes. And there are also opportunities to provide information, obviously, to legislators in terms of lobbying and having conversations rather than just testifying. When I was in Goshen, we would actually bring down a team, and it would include the superintendent, the business manager, school board members, as well as education employees. And we would come down and have dinner and visit with our elected officials to help give them insight and information related to the upcoming bills that were going to be before them. The work also obviously continues and goes on throughout the entire year, and it's equally as important, I would argue, to think about all of the same practices and involvement when it comes to joint interim committee meetings. That is often when a bulk or the bulk of work is done around the top bills that will be addressed in the upcoming session. So it's important to provide that information and opportunity for educators' voice to be involved in the process at the interim committee meetings as well. I know you all have amazing full plates and calendars, and it can be very challenging. If it's helpful, please know that Wyoming Education Association tracks all of the education bills on our bill tracker, and we provide legislative updates during the general session and also typically after joint interim committee meetings. You all are welcome to visit our website and subscribe and to look at those legislative updates and the bill tracker to follow the status of bills that we are monitoring. I will tell you, I like to try and remain pretty optimistic. And I think there is so much happening across the state with public education. When I think about the pretty phenomenal and important work that is being done by the State Board of Education, particularly around the profile of a graduate, not to mention all of their work around addressing and looking at the standards. Of course, we have the governor's initiative, the RIDE initiative. So I do think that there are a lot of great things happening. And much like the school university partnership, when we're all working together, we know that there's room to continue to grow and improve. But I will reiterate, that requires change. And when we're making those changes, it's extremely and vitally important for educators' voice to be part of that process. If you are interested and thinking about any of the ideas of like putting together a team and coming down to Cheyenne to lobby, please know that the WEA has lobby training, and we're happy to share and provide that to you and or any members who are interested in doing it. That can be beneficial just because of the fact that there are certain etiquette that has to be followed, for example, when you're in a committee meeting. So we're happy to provide that training, and I will tell you, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you're interested in any of that. I want to take just a moment to really, again, extend my gratitude and appreciation. I know all of you are continuing to do such great work, and it's so important. And unfortunately, it can sometimes be thankless, but I want all of you to know that I certainly am grateful and appreciative and want to thank you. As I said, if you want to go to our website to subscribe to our legislative updates, or if you have questions and want to email me, please feel free at any time. You can reach out to me, because ultimately it is about us continuing to collaborate and work together, so that ultimately our students benefit. And, I just think about how great Wyoming is and all of our public schools. And we really should be celebrating the success. And I just appreciate all that you do. I will also, once again, thank Colby and Nicholas for reaching out to me to share this information with you all. Thank you and take good care.